Guilty as charged, Yankuba Toure looked on as the judge passed the judgment, his hands behind his back. The guilty verdict came at exactly 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Justice Ibrahima Jaita said the prosecution had proven its case beyond reasonable doubt.
I have no cogent reason to disbelieve the testimonies of the prosecution witnesses because defense witnesses themselves admitted that there was no reason for the prosecution witnesses to lie against the accused person. I have had the opportunity to watch the accused person, our Minty, Mami Minty, closely when they were giving evidence. I must say that their demeanors were not convincing at all, and I am not persuaded by it. As Mami Minty and our Minty admitted on the cross-examination that they would do anything possible to make the accused person happy and protect him. In my view, these admissions on cross-examination leave much to be desired. I am therefore satisfied that the prosecution has sufficiently established the constituent elements of the offense as charged. I am further satisfied that the prosecution has proved their case beyond reasonable doubt, and the accused person, Yankuba Toure, is accordingly found guilty and convicted as charged.
The judge said he believed the testimony of Alaji Kanyi and 3 others who testified in the case, whose testimonies, he said, depicted the true picture of how Mr. Usman Koro Sise was murdered in cold blood in 1995.
The testimony of Alaji Kanyi shows a grand scheme of conspiracy by Edward Singate, Peter Singate, and the accused person to kill Usman Koro Sise. Alaji Kanyi gave evidence that they, BK Jata, Tumbul Tamba, and Pa Aliu Gomez, were briefed by Edward Singate when they were going to get rid of someone, and they were taken to the residence of the accused person in Kersering. Alaji Kanyi stated that at the time of arrival at the residence of the accused person, there were no guards or family members of the accused in his residence. Alaji Kanyi further gave evidence of how Edward Singate and Peter Singate went to the airport while he was instructed to be on guard at the residence of the accused person. Alaji Kanyi also gave evidence that the said Edward Singate and Peter Singate returned to the residence of the accused person from the airport. He stated that the accused person came with them to his residence. Alaji Kanyi further gave evidence that Edward Singate arrived at the residence of the accused person with the disease, and it was signaled to him, Alaji Kanyi, by Edward Singate that the disease was the one to be killed. Alaji Kanyi further went on to give eyewitness account of how Peter Singate used a pistol to hit the deceased, followed by Edward Singate. He also gave evidence that the accused person also used the same pistol to hit the deceased, whom at the time fell on the ground. He also gave evidence that BK Jata, Tumbul Tamba, Pa Ali Gomez, and himself were instructed by the accused, by Edward Singate, to hit the deceased with the said pistol, which they did. I have observed the demeanor of Alaji Kanyi whilst testifying in tears as to how Usman Koro Sise was bulgoined to death. In my view, the tears from Alaji Kanyi were not crocodile tears, they were tears of remorse and regret. Alaji Kanyi testified that the place was full of blood and that Edward Singate instructed them to place the body of Usman Koro Sise in his official vehicle, which they did. Alaji Kanyi also gave evidence of how they, BK Jata, Tumbul Tamba, Pa Aliu Gomez, and himself were instructed to clean the blood in the house of the accused person, while Edward Singate, Peter Singate, and the accused himself left with the body of the deceased. I must say that the above piece of evidence by Alaji Kanyi shows that the accused person was a primary participant in the killing of Usman Koro Sise. Alaji Kanyi, as an eyewitness, stated how the accused person, together with Edward Singate, Peter Singate, BK Jata, Tumbul Tamba, Pa Aliu Gomez, and himself used a pistol to hit Usman Koro Sise to death. Alaji Kanyi's evidence also shows that when they finished hitting the deceased to death with the said pistol, they placed his body in the deceased official vehicle. I must say clearly that this evidence has not been materially controverted or challenged by the accused person, and there was no enough cross-examination to destroy the veracity of the evidence of Alaji Kanyi.
The judge had wanted to adjourn the case for sentencing, but Mr. Toure's lawyer said sentencing in such a case was simple and there was no need to return to court on another day when the Eid is just around the corner. The judge then took about 5 minutes and then handed out his sentence.
Having found the convict guilty of murder, guilty of the murder of Usman Koro Sise in cold blood, and having considered that this court does not have any discretion under Section 188 of the Criminal Code, the convict Yankuba Toure is hereby sentenced to death. And pursuant to Section 252 of the Criminal Procedure Code, the said sentence of death shall be by hanging.
Mr. Toure declined to speak to the FAD network as prison police officers escorted him out of the courtroom.
Mr. Toure, do you have any comment?
Careful.
Mr. Toure, do you have a comment?
Toure's lawyer said they would mount an appeal of the conviction and the sentencing.
We're going to file an appeal, simply Sita. I'll talk to my client, hopefully we'll file an appeal.
You will file an appeal?
Thank you.
A small crowd of sympathizers who were in court to stand in support of Mr. Toure were dissatisfied by the judge's verdict.
Because we do dega.
Lan moo tax d'accord.
D'accord ñu because Alhaji Kandeh dafa war a ñëw.
That is some of the people.
Ibrahima Jete is a liar. They're all the same people.
You mean the judge?
They're the one who killed Koro Sise. It's not Yankuba Toure. Yankuba Toure has nothing to do with Koro Sise's death. He will be free. My father, Jawara's days, my father, Alhaji Tumani Minte, was sentenced to death. But he was free. The court of appeal. Yes. Ibrahima Jete is a liar.
So you are saying the judge is a liar?
He's a liar. He's a judge. He's a liar.
Are you insulting the judge?
But he's telling the truth. There's no truth in it. He's one-sided.
What are you going to do?
What we're going to do, we live in Almighty Allah.
What are you to Yankuba Toure? What are you to Mr. Toure?
I'm his brother.
So that is a brother there. So you are also not happy?
I'm not happy at all. I'm not happy, and this will not happen in the Gambia. It will never happen in the Gambia. And if this thing will happen in the Gambia, the whole Gambia will be there. Nobody can see this. No, we don't. Hey.
So those are the reactions from some of the people that are here.
ci soxor ak añaan loolu lañ ko tëjee waaye lu tax ñu bàyyi ñeneen ñi moom ñu ne dañ koo tëj live.
yaa booy leen ko tuddee yow salal la.
Yankuba Toure suma doom la Yankuba Toure moom a yóbbu Màkka suma doom la.
lii dañ ko yàgg a tooga dañ ko yàgg a tooga.
da ngeen ko yàgg a mere.
dañ ko yàgg a tooga.
ci loo xam ne du dëgg.
soo déggee jooj bi
yàlla baax na.
justice dégul soo déggee justice Ibrahima Jete lu ma waxee lu ma ridee his ruling mu ngi laa woon ne la su may ku gis ni déglu ko I've been following this court ku la gis xam ne this part of the organized conspiracy and campaign against Yaya Jammeh and the APRC lu xew mooy ne soo déggee tey justice Jete lu ma waxee li nga xam ne Edward Singate moom mi nga xam ne moo di author of all this nonsense the main guy behind this ñu invite ko TRRC yaa ma dégg xam ne isa modara ñu ba ko mu dem yoonam parce que so it's by proxy so dañ jël Yankuba Touré yaa ma dégg toroxal ko because dem na TRRC bañ a wax and you know it was a stage protest outside the TRRC waaye yàlla ko Musa rek ni ko doon rey su génnoon foofu so mu ngi laa woon ne dëkk bi fii yaa ma dégg it's becoming lawlessness dañ ko jaay doole and you know that my brother dañ ko jaay doole soo déggee li ma wax yëpp mu ngi wax affaire Edward Singate is responsible for all this mess amin dañ ko jaay doole waaye nag we gonna appeal su neexee yàlla we gonna appeal yes we gonna appeal.
am ngeen confidence ne soo leen appeal bi di ngeen soog.
of course because ma la wax mooy ñoom nañ jël rek Alhaji Kandeh yow nga ne yow alone yow la donc Tumul Tamba Edward Singate Pierre Singate yaa ma dégg ngeen bàyyi ko mu dem yoonam ngeen jël kii di ko toroxal because ñu na TRRC bañ a wax It's a conspiracy. Yes, the conspiracy.
So Yankuba is being used as a scapegoat.
Of course. Of course. I don't think that. Momunga the testimony of Alaji Kanji is credible. Alaji Kanji munga implicate Edward Singate. Munga implicate Edward Singate. So Edward Singate is the author of the death of Koro Ceesay. He's the main guy behind this. Then come go jay dollar rek mo tax ñu def ko ni ko def ni. But we are not. Huh? Of course. No, he is illegally sentenced to death. He's an innocent somebody. Yankuba is a nice man. You all know that. I've been following this from day one. Honorable Babukar Nyang. Understand? So I know what's going on. Then go use as a scapegoat. You know, it's a conspiracy and campaign against the APRC government on a Yaya Jame. So they have to be very careful. They have to be very, very careful. Kuma am ndey ak so Yankuba Touré amul ndey. Wa ñu am ndey mo Alaji Kanji ak Edward Singate ak Bila Singate ñu bayila ñu def seen yoon. Lo mu ngi la wone dëkk bi amul ben lo leen na ñoo décider. The constitution of the Gambia fonkati ko. Dañ ko tégué bor. Amatu ben njëriñ the constitution of the Gambia de. These guys in the judiciary amatu respect for it. Police they are not fair, my brother.
Thank you. So, viewers, that is the development here at the High Court in Banjul. Well, since this case started way back in 2019, when Mr. Yankuba Touré appeared before the TRRC and refused to testify, saying he had constitutional immunity, that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that Mr. Touré must stand trial for the murder of Koro Ceesay. So, judgment came today. This judgment was an extensive, very lengthy marathon judgment there by Justice Ibrahim Jaite. He looked at a number of issues. One thing that he looked at, he relied heavily on the testimony of Alaji Kanyi. Alaji Kanyi came to court, admitted taking part, that he was an accomplice in the murder of Koro Ceesay. He went through everything, how they murdered the plan, from the planning, how it was staged, and how they bludgeoned Mr. Koro Ceesay way back in June 1995. To death. So the judge relied heavily on that, but also the judge also looked at a number of issues. One thing also he looked at has to do with the issue of proving the case beyond reasonable doubt. That burden lied with the prosecution, but according to the judge, the prosecution proved their case beyond reasonable doubt. The other issue has to do with the issue of alibi. Mr. Touré came to court. Initially, when he was arrested by the police, he refused to speak. He said he had constitutional immunity and he was not going to say anything. So one thing in court that happened is when he opened his defense and he was testifying in his own case, Mr. Touré said that the day or the night Mr. Koro Ceesay was murdered, he was in fact there. He said he went to the airport to see of the then President Yahya Jammeh, and then from there he went to State House, where he met the commander of the State House, Mr. Lantomon Tamba, that he chatted with Mr. Tamba. So this is alibi that the judge rejected. He said he should have told police this, so that the police can investigate and try to find out the veracity of this. But he said this never happened, and he came to court, and when he was being cross-examined, the prosecution asked him whether he was ready to call the former president's driver, who is alive, as well as Mr. Langton Tamba, but he said no. So as a result, he dismissed that, and subsequently he found Mr. Touré guilty of murdering Koro. Initially, what he wanted to do was to adjourn and then later return with the sentencing. But the lawyer of Mr. Touré said he should just go ahead and hand over the sentencing. And in his sentencing, it was actually very quick. In a space of 2-3 minutes, he came out with his sentencing, and he sentenced Mr. Touré to death. According to the 187 of the Criminal Procedure Code, he sentenced him to death, and this death, he said, should come by way of hanging. Lamin Jai reporting for the Fatu Network here at the High Court in Banjul.